We arrested quite top guys. We arrested the governance of that. All of them had cellular phones. These guys were arrested. They had Wi-Fi. Most of you are running around crying for Wi-Fi. They had Wi-Fi, those guys there. So they're quite organized. 20 of them were arrested, those people, with 15 AK-47s, with 6 hunting rifles. Some of those they've broken in different houses and they've stolen them there. And we have had 2 pump guns and one RU5, which is filed out in terms of the number, so we'll be able to trace it. Last time we found about 4,000 rounds of ammunition. This time we found 6,000 rounds of ammunition with the sealed boxes, 6 boxes of AK-47s coming from that country where they are coming from.
And that is, of course, the police minister giving us an update on, what happened in Stilfontein. You'd remember that the residents of Stilfontein in the northwest have raised crime and policing concerns with him, and he's visited the area where 20 suspected illegal miners were arrested yesterday. Now, the minister believes that the suspects are senior members of criminal illegal mining organizations operating in the area, of course, telling us here on the show that they are somewhat at level 1. When it comes to the ranking, and saying that, of course, that they are involved in governance as well. And the minister talking about how at least 24 firearms and ammunition were confiscated during the arrests. And now Cele has promised to return to the area with solutions to some of the residents' main concerns. The suspected Zamazamas were arrested at a mine shaft outside the town following an intensive operation by police and other law enforcement agencies. They are due to appear at the Stilfontein Magistrates Court tomorrow. Now, we understand that they are going to be facing preliminary charges of conspiracy to commit robbery, possession of prohibited firearms and ammunition, and contravention of the Immigration Act. Staying with policing matters, the Independent Police Investigative Directorate is investigating over 5,200 criminal cases against police officers. This, of course, is in the last financial year. Now, some have reportedly been fired already and others are facing jail time. Now, this comes amid concerns around the crime stats that we continue to get quarterly, and they continue to paint somewhat of a bleak picture of crime fighting efforts in South Africa. Let's look at this issue further now with the Institute for Security Studies independent researcher and consultant David Bruce. Thank you so much, Mr. Bruce, for your time this evening. Just how damaging is the fact that there are so many cases that are being investigated against police officers?
Well, it's difficult to say to what degree these cases are, in fact, even representative of the problem of police misconduct. So basically what you're looking at here in the IPID's report is cases which have been reported to IPID for different reasons. But for instance, if you dig down into the report, there's 2 cases of corruption which have been reported to IPID related to municipal police. Now, we know that some of the municipal police departments are systematically linked to corruption related to traffic enforcement. So, for instance, the 2 cases that are reported on in the IPID report obviously have nothing to do with the scale of the problem of corruption in municipal policing.
And what does it do, though, when some of these, reports surface and talk about how difficult things are when it comes to, these particular matters that are being investigated? You think, looking at assault and all of that, what does it do to the public's trust in the police?
Well, certainly, I think these figures are one of the factors that contribute to, a lack of trust in the police. I think, the critical issue here is that, the issue of police conduct and, police discipline isn't being managed effectively by the police themselves. It isn't really recognized as a critical issue by, the political leadership of South Africa, and the police disciplinary system has, for instance, been undergoing a systematic decline in its effectiveness in recent years.
And where would you say the shortfalls are when it comes to dealing with the issues around, the discipline within the ranks of the SAPS?
Well, you see, discipline is a multifaceted issue. It starts with a recruitment system, but it also then is related to management of the disciplinary system itself. And so, if you look at the approach which is being taken by national police management to the issue of police discipline, there isn't any really proper engagement with ensuring that there is an effective disciplinary system in place.
Does it then also possibly add to some kind of impunity with police thinking that they could be above the law if this issue of ill discipline is not being addressed as adequately as you say?
Yeah, well, I think, I think what you would say is that, discipline is taken seriously quite selectively. And so it's not that, there is generalized impunity in all cases, but the types of issues that tend to receive attention are very selective. So, for instance, if a case receives a high degree of public attention, it's likely to receive, be dealt with more thoroughly. But many of the cases which aren't in the public eye are largely neglected.
And when one looks at, the seriousness of some of the crimes, that are being dealt with here and being investigated, you're seeing, of course, rape as well as assault in some of these particular cases that are being investigated. What picture does it paint for us as South Africans when it comes to the state of the SAPS and what's going on there?
Yeah, well, I think that's quite a disturbing issue. I mean, for instance, South Africa is a signatory to the International Convention of Torture. After the end of the apartheid, basically, South Africa committed to eradicating torture. But if you look at the manner in which police cases of torture are dealt with, you would get the impression that basically torture is something that is generally is basically treated quite leniently by the SAPS. So that would be one case. I mean, I think on the other hand, you would find that cases of allegations of rape against police officers are treated more seriously. So insofar as there has been public concern about gender-based violence, that has, I think, led to a greater level of seriousness by the SAPS about dealing with those kinds of cases. But in other cases like torture, the issue is not dealt with in a very serious way at all.
Juxtaposing what we are seeing the IPID say around the thousands of the case that it's currently investigating, in fact, and looking at the numbers that we've seen of firearms being stolen inside the police office, stations. We saw around 158 earlier this year stolen from a Norwood police station. We saw, of course, around 10 in a police station in Ekurhuleni. What does this do if police officers are being investigated for crimes themselves when it comes to crime fighting efforts such as this one, because they are now becoming the targets as well? Well,
I'm not quite clear about your question, but I mean, I think the issue of the loss of and theft of police firearms is partly an issue which potentially also then highlights the challenge of police corruption. And so, again, it raises questions about whether we have in place effective systems for addressing police corruption in South Africa.
And I was, of course, looking at the fact that, if you are being investigated, some of them will have to stay at home. And that's talking about the issue of not having adequate resources in the police stations, especially because if maybe, let's say, 10 of the police officers in a station are at home and then criminals come and pounce on those particular stations to be able to steal some of the firearms themselves. So how much of a risk does it put some of the police stations when it comes to these investigations, because they can't be at work if they're being investigated?
Yeah, well, I'd be inclined not to link the two. Well, I mean, potentially the police officers who are the subject of investigations might be linked to police criminality in one form or another. So, I would suggest that it isn't going to strengthen the position of the police to keep those people at work. And so, insofar as people are linked to criminality, the focus should be on removing them from the police service. I wouldn't, be inclined to be concerned about the fact that they aren't in attendance at police stations.
Now, Mr. Bruce, I'm not sure if you've seen the story of the 21-year-old who was arrested linked to the murders of the six, the six sex workers. There was, of course, some reports suggesting that police may not have handled that particular, case properly, especially looking at how, some of these women are saying that they've been reporting the cases of missing people and were being turned away. They were not receiving the adequate attention that they deserve. I wonder, what do you make of the handling of, of that particular matter by police, especially looking at what is coming out there?
Right. Okay. It's difficult for me to comment on that. I mean, I think what's particularly of concern in this case is the women who were missing, the fact that, it was only after some time that the whole case has been uncovered. And so, I would be inclined to be concerned about the fact that, the fact that these people were missing was not given serious attention, and maybe some of these deaths could have been preempted if greater attention had been given to the missing, the reports of missing people.
Yeah, and I suppose, of course, IPID then will have to look at some of those claims there. But thank you so much for your time. Do appreciate it. That was David Bruce, Institute for Security Studies, independent researcher and consultant, of course, giving us a sense of, just how serious and how damaging are these claims that, in fact, reports suggesting that over 5,200 criminal cases are being investigated against police.